We're not doing a full teardown. If you guys are considering taking any one of GM's LS-based engines, whether it's an iron block, aluminum block, whatever the case may be, and swapping it into a car that it doesn't belong to, definitely stick around, because we're going to go over a couple things that you definitely want to check before putting this in your project car. So in the last video regarding this engine, Steve and I actually swapped this into my C4 Corvette just to make sure that it fit, which it did. Bolted it up to the transmission, got the engine mounts in, everything cleared. And then yesterday after work, I actually pulled this and the transmission out of the car, which is right behind you on a stand. And the reason behind that is there are a couple of things that I want to go over, double check, and potentially fix before we put this in the car. And like I said, if you guys are thinking of doing a swap like this on one of your cars, these few things that we're going to go over are going to save you time, money, aggravation. There's nothing worse than hooking that last fuel line up, connecting the battery, starting it, and you have a noise or no oil pressure. Or maybe it does run fine, but you get it to your tuner, and now you've paid a couple $100s to get the car on the dyno, and you run into issues. Ask me how I know. So I'm hoping this video helps some of you guys out. We're not doing a full teardown on this. You'll see in a couple minutes I'm going to pull the timing cover and the oil pump. We're going to go over a couple of things to look at in the bottom end. But again, you could tear this engine down to the bare block, bring it somewhere, get it honed, new cam bearings. This is just the basics. Especially if the car is going to be turbocharged, which this one is. So I'm going to rip the timing cover, oil pan off. We'll flip this motor around and we'll dive in. If you guys watched the last video on this when we actually put it in the car, I picked this engine up for 250 bucks from a friend of mine. He never ran the engine. He was using it as a mock-up motor. He was actually putting this in a Porsche, which he has an LS2 in there now. So this was kind of the test mule to get brackets, engine mounts, things like that to fit. So he never ran the engine. He got it from somebody that had it in a Tahoe that supposedly rebuilt it, but the truck rotted in half and the engine came out. Now we had this cover off in the last video because we actually put a cam in this engine, and I'm actually already seeing an issue. Now I think this is something we did because we had the oil pump off last time, but the oil pump pickup tube is not seated all the way in the pump, and the O-ring actually looks like it's crushed too. So again, that was my fault. I kind of knew when the engine was going in that it was going to be coming back out again and getting checked. But whether it's you or someone else, that is definitely one thing to check. So we will be addressing that as well. I usually like to drop the pan while it's still hanging so that any oil that's still in there hopefully doesn't come to the top, although I'm sure I'm going to make an absolute mess even though I put the pan underneath. Nothing actually came out of the bottom. If I didn't put the pan there, it would have had 46 quarts of oil and I'd be mopping it up off the floor. All right, so with the pan off, I'm going to take the oil pump pickup and the windage tray off to get a better look at the bottom end. And then I'll show you the first thing that you definitely want to check before you put one of these in your car. All right, so you might be able to tell we have our dial indicator set up on the front of the crank, although we're not ready to measure it yet. What we're going to be checking here for is thrust run out. Now, you have basically two different types of load on your crankshaft. You have radial load, all right, so those journal bearings on both your mains and your rods that support the rotation of the crankshaft and the rods and pistons. And then on this middle main cap here, you have a thrust bearing. So rather than just the circular bearing for the radial load, you have two flat plates on either side, and that is for your thrust. Now, why is this such a big deal? Number one, you don't want excessive bearing wear anywhere in the engine. Number two, all of these engines, whether it is an iron block, aluminum block, whatever the case may be, have a cam and crank sensor. Now your crank sensor is on the passenger side, right by the starter. That's the sensor there. And then on your crankshaft, you have your reluctor wheel. So if your crank moves too far from side to side, basically back and forth in the block, this reluctor wheel gets away from the crank, you lose signal, engine stalls, backfires, you're stuck on the side of the road. So I want to check that. We actually noticed when we were putting this engine in that it seemed to have excessive amounts of thrust. Again, that's just by feel. I believe the spec from GM is about 1.5 mil or 1.5 thousandths of an inch. to about 7 or 8 thousandths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off all of the rod caps. We're going to push the pistons down into the bore. And then I'm going to remove all of the main caps with the exception of the one for the thrust bearing. And then we're going to take a measurement and we'll see where we stand. Okay, so we have all of our main caps off. I number them all according to cylinder. Again, if you're not familiar with it, these have the cracked rod bolt design. So even if they don't, you want to make sure that they go back in the same spot, but those are numbered, so we're good there. I have all of the main caps with the exception of the thrust bearing undone. When you go to do these, don't forget that you have the small 10 millimeter bolt right in the side of the main. Right there, there's one for each cap. So I have all of those removed. So right now, the only thing holding the crank in the engine is the block itself and then our thrust bearing main cap. So I have our dial indicator set on the edge of the crank. Now before I did that, I made sure that I loaded the indicator, so I got about a full turn of it out of it. I have it zeroed out right now, so I'm going to set the camera up and then I'm going to gently pry on the crankshaft forward. I have it all the way in the back. Now we're going to pry this way and we're going to see what our measurement is. Now again, it wants to be about 1.5 mils to about 8 thousandths of an inch. So there shouldn't be very much movement on there at all. But again, when we felt it, it felt like more, but best way to check is precision measurement instrument like that. So let me move this pan out of the way. I'll set this up so you guys can see the indicator and we'll see what we come up with. All right, dial indicator set on the end of the crank. I have my indicator zeroed out. I'm going to go to the back now and pry against the crank and we'll see how much movement we actually have. So about 37 thousandths, entirely too much. Definitely not ideal, but I'm glad I checked it before I just, started hooking things up and running the car, because I definitely would have been frustrated. All right, guess we need main bearings. Okay, I pulled the main cap with the thrust bearing out, and it is scorched. It's got 2 score marks here, and you can see this should look like the regular bearing surface there. It might be a little hard to tell, look here, only captured on camera, but it is not in good shape. So the way that was in the engine, basically what was happening was the whole crank was getting pushed this way, and it eventually wore out that bearing, and it actually looks like it hurt the crankshaft as well. So I'm about to pull the entire crank out of this. One thing that can cause that, again, this was in a Tahoe. If you have a stick shift car, sometimes the preload on your throwout bearing with your foot on the clutch, you're basically putting pressure on that and you're kind of shoving the crank towards the harmonic balancer side. On automatic transmissions, if the torque converter is not spaced out correctly, there's a spec for that, which we're going to go over when we set this 700R4 in this engine. But basically too much pressure is trying to push the crank. Think of it as trying to push the crank out the front of the block. So that's where checking thrust and then properly spacing your converter or setting up a clutch and hydraulic throwout bearing correctly comes into play, because then you run into issues like this. So again, not ideal, but I'm glad we caught it before we put this in the car and tried to run it. And that is the thrust bearing out of the block. You can see you start to have a little bit of bearing material peeling off right there. So it's a good thing we checked this, because if this ran at all, it would have been a matter of time before I was pulling this apart anyway. So with that being said, now we have a little bit of a different plan. Going to end up taking the heads off all of the sensors. I actually brought the block to a machine shop local to me, and kind of already knew the answer, but asked their expertise. It's not worth welding the crank. By the time you're done welding it, rough cutting it, machining it, you're better off just buying a new crank. I don't really want to put a ton of money into this, so I think the plan is going to be to locate another stock 24 tooth crank. Hopefully that's in good shape, and we'll try that. Maybe a new set of bearings. I think I'm going to pull the cam back out. I I might send the block off to get hot tanked and cleaned out. So again, a little bit more than I wanted to do. I was kind of hoping to just be able to go over this once, maybe fix a few small issues and then put it in the car, but it's just not the way it goes sometimes. So all the sensors are going to come out. We're going to pull the heads. I'm going to knock all 8 slugs and rods out of the block. I may even bring those to the machine shop as well. Maybe have them resized and do like ARP rod bolts, but again, I don't know. I don't really want to make more than like 500 wheel with this in that car with the rear mounted turbo. So this 5.3 that is in my Camaro has a good amount of work done to it. And although when it's together, it runs really well, I don't think I want to do as much to this one. But that's where we stand for now. So I'm going to knock the sensors out of this thing. We'll pull the heads. At least that'll give us a chance to look at the cylinder walls, see if the cross hatching is still in there. And then if nothing else, I can open up the ring gap a little bit because I intend to shove some boost down this thing's throat. So let's get started and we'll tear this thing down to basically a bare block. Also, this oil pressure sensor was hand tight. If you ever go to replace these or even pull them out, they do have a specific socket for it. All right, some people complain that a normal socket will sometimes break the top off the sensor, so we'll probably end up replacing this, but I took it out with the correct socket anyway. Cam position sensor, the crank sensor out. Look at this on the coolant crossover. Somebody just globbed silicone on either O-ring, so who knows if one of those was blocked off. And again, doing a complete teardown on something like this might seem like a little overkill, but honestly, after what I saw with the crank sensor, the crankshaft, don't really want to take any chances, and I don't have too much faith in the person that put this together. Now, another thing I was going to do in this video, before we found an issue with the crank, was going to be measuring for pushrod length, which we will eventually do, but obviously not in this video. What I'm going to do now is one at a time. I'm going to take the pistons out, put them with their respective caps so we can keep everything together. One thing you want to make sure of when taking this apart too, with the lifter trays, just make sure that they're not cracked anywhere. You don't want those lifters actually spinning inside the bore. These both look good. Move on to the other side. All right, since the engine itself defeated me, I'm going to start breaking down these cylinder heads and get these prepped for new valve stem seals and to install the upgraded valve springs that we're going to do for the cam that will eventually go back in the motor. So this process, pretty straightforward. First, you just want to drop the bit in the head. And I'm going to snug that down onto the rocker stanchions inside the cylinder head itself. All right. And then this stud, or this nut, basically gets compressed. That will in turn compress the valve springs. Then we'll use a magnet to grab the keepers. Sometimes if these are stuck, you might have to give them a little persuasion from the back. And you can see after we actually compressed it, it opened the valves. Just going to collect our valve locks. Put these in a Ziploc bag with all the rest of the hardware. And we can go ahead and back this off. keep these as well because the springs I'm going to be using are going to reuse these old springs. And now valve stem seals can get removed. Those are in there. Oh, these are obviously going in the garbage, but I'm going to pull all these off as well. And then we'll repeat the process for every other set of valves. And once this is done, I'll grab the other head. We'll do that as well. All right, 2 totally disassembled cylinder heads. All the hardware, valves, locks, keepers, retainers, everything is in the Ziploc bag ready to go. And because at this point, until I order some engine parts, kind of stuck, but I'm going to use probably one of my favorite tools. And that is my small parts cleaner. So I'm going to load all the valves up in here. We're going to soak it in degreaser and then turn this bad boy on. It actually has a heating element in it as well. It makes a really annoying sound because it's like a sonic cleaner, but it does a really, really good job. In fact, the 265 from that 56 Chevy that I've been building, when that engine came apart, if you happen to see that video, it was dirty isn't even the word. It looked like that car didn't have an oil change for its entire life. And we put that back together, not in the car yet, still on the stand because I'm waiting to paint it. But it did a really good job of cleaning all those parts. So we're going to do the same thing with these valves. We'll run the pistons and connecting rods through as well. So let's fill this thing up with some cleaner. So just keep in mind what these things look like right now. Usually let this stuff sit for about a half hour with the machine on, crank up the heat. Does a pretty good job. All right, so we have our heating element on. We're going to set it for half an hour. And once this is done, we'll pull it out and see what that stuff looks like. So, one pass through the machine. They're not perfect, but they are a lot better than they were before we put them in. So, this isn't even heated up all the way. I rinsed these off. I'm going to dry these, set them aside, and we're going to throw 1 or 2 pistons in because I already knocked the piston rings out and stamped the numbers in each of them, both on the rod cap and the piston itself, so we don't get those confused. So let me dry these off, and then we'll see how this does with a couple pistons. All right, so like I said, I pulled all the rings out. A good amount of carbon buildup on the top of the piston. Same thing on the skirts near the wrist pin. So I'm going to put 2 in at a time, just because this thing is not as large as it could be for this. So we're going to have to do these twice, just because I didn't get enough degreaser. But it's fine. We got plenty of time to clean all this stuff. So another half hour. Did a pretty good job on the side that was actually in the cleaner. Kind of see the difference between the two there, but big difference on the connecting rods, pistons as well. Came out pretty clean. Now I'm going to do the same thing with these. I'm going to rinse these off, put a little Marvel Mystery Oil in the wrist pins, and then I'll finish doing the rest of them because I want to do all 8. And as you can see, each side needs to go in twice. So I don't even want to do the math on that, but it's a lot of hours cleaning, but it should be worth it. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Unfortunately, I thought this video was going to go in a different direction, and clearly we're a couple steps behind, but I'm determined to clean this thing up, get it running. I'm going back to the machine shop Tuesday to see if they have a good 24 tooth 5.3 crank that I can use. If not, I do have one in a motor underneath the table here. I prefer not to use that because that's a complete short block right now. I mean, I guess we could take everything from the motor that I just disassembled and swap it over, but I have other plans for that motor, so see if we can leave it be. Again, not the way I wanted this to go, but sometimes that happens with the ran when parked $200 Facebook Marketplace special. So it is what it is. Thank you guys very much for watching. We'll see you very soon.